This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, reporting tonight from the Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver.
And good evening on this President's Day night, day 3 of these games here in Vancouver. But our attention tonight is focused instead on a growing political story back home. One of the modern-day bright lights of the Democratic Party and a well-known name in the U.S. Senate said today he's calling it quits and he's taking a big shot at Washington on his way out. Senator Evan Bayh says he's sick of how things work or don't work, and his departure from the Senate further jumbles the political table for a still new Democratic president. So we begin tonight in Washington with our chief White House correspondent and NBC News political director Chuck Todd. Chuck, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Look, Evan Bayh isn't retiring because he thought he was going to lose this year, though he was going to have to work a little bit harder to win re-election. He's leaving because he didn't have the stomach for Congress anymore. In fact, frustration with Congress and Washington is turning into a recurring theme this year.
I do not love Congress.
Evan Bayh's abrupt decision to retire and blunt explanation dramatized the recurring theme in Washington lately: gridlock.
There is much too much partisanship and not enough progress. Too much narrow ideology and not enough practical problem solving.
Those close to Bayh say he'd been wavering for months on whether to run again. He telegraphed his frustration with Congress in a recent Q&A with President Obama.
And are we willing to make some of the tough decisions to actually head this country in a better direction?
The president himself has frequently hammered at Washington gridlock, most recently with House Republicans.
They didn't send us to Washington to fight each other in some sort of political steel cage match to see who comes out alive.
Members of both parties are frustrated. Retiring Republican Senator George Voinovich complained bitterly at the Senate's failure to establish a bipartisan deficit reduction commission.
On too many occasions, Congress has been unwilling to experience short-term pain to achieve long-term gain.
This year, 5 Democratic and 6 Republican senators are retiring. It's the most since 1996. Many left then for the same reasons Bayh cited today. Here they are back then sharing their frustrations with NBC's Lisa Myers.
Much more partisan today. It's more acerbic.
Partisanship. I've been in caucuses where we didn't spend any time at all talking about the issue. It was how to diddle so-and-so on the other side.
But many analysts believe 14 years later, things have gotten worse in the Senate.
The partisan polarization in this country is so severe at this point and frankly shows no signs of letting up.
Now, Brian, Evan Bayh really left Democrats in a lurch. A lot of Senate Democrats are very upset with him tonight because there's just a few days left before they can even find a candidate to run in Indiana at this point. So that in itself has left a lot of people wondering if Evan Bayh, when the tough got going, as one Democrat put it to me, he went ahead and left. Brian?
All right, Chuck Todd, bigger question, of course, how to change this political atmosphere in this country, but a question for another day. We are following another major story tonight in Afghanistan, one of the biggest battles of the war. Now, in its 3rd day, a tough fight to try to pry loose control of an important stronghold from the Taliban. It's the town of Marja in Afghanistan's Helmand province. NBC's Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski has our report.
For the U.S. Marines in Marja, the fight got tougher today. The battle for this Taliban stronghold. And tonight there are still pockets of fierce Taliban resistance, meaning the battle for Marja could drag on for weeks. But it's likely to take even longer than that before we know for sure if President Obama's new military strategy for Afghanistan has passed this first critical test. Brian?
Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon for us tonight. Jim, thanks. Now we move to Huntsville, Alabama, where the questions continue to pile up in a case of Amy Bishop, University of Alabama professor accused of shooting 6 colleagues, killing 3 of them. She was arraigned today on murder charges. Now some people are asking how she ever ended up on the faculty, given some of her trouble in her past. NBC's Tan Trung reports from Huntsville.
The University of Alabama at Huntsville is eerily quiet today. Classes canceled for the holiday are now canceled all week. Flags fly at half-staff, and flowers have been left in memory of victims of last week's shooting. Last Friday, from NBC News, Huntsville, Alabama.
And here in Vancouver, amid all the Olympic competition, this was also a day of mourning. Friends and teammates said an emotional goodbye to the 21-year-old Georgian luger who was killed on a training run here Friday. The body is now on its long journey back to the nation of Georgia, to a hometown village still in shock. Our own Stephanie Gosk is there.
In the tiny mountain village of Bakuriani, a mother cries for her son. My strong son, she wails, I would rather die than you. And a sister sobs. David Kumaritashvili says his wife and daughter haven't been able to eat since they heard about Nodar. These photos show the Georgian luger enjoying life in the Olympic Village with his teammates. But the smiles, his father says, were masking growing fears. 3 days before his death, the 21-year-old Nodar called home.
He said, it feels like my head is coming off.
And of course, along with the sadness, there is very much a sense here in Vancouver that these games must go on. You hear it all the time. In fact, there may be no higher fallen tribute than that. Today, all eyes were on American skier Bode Miller's comeback bid in the men's downhill. Now, if you wish to wait till tonight and to see NBC Sports coverage to see who won, here's how we've done it in past years. Now would be a good time to look away from your television set as we show you the medal winners in that competition. And now, after a suitable amount of time to pause as we put the results on the screen, we will move to last night, a performance that is being described as fantastic, awesome, unbelievable. It was all that, a breathtaking performance by the Chinese in pair skating with a score to match. A world record, 76.66, really the closest thing to perfect anyone who watches the sport had ever seen. Finals in that event are tonight. And the long wait is over with an upset win in men's moguls last night. Canada won its first ever gold medal in a Winter Olympics in Canada. This city has erupted. They haven't calmed down yet. When our broadcast continues on this President's Day, never before seen footage from a day burned into the American memory. Love Field, Dallas, 1963. And the first conversation with the family of American Olympic hopeful Kevin Pierce, whose dream was derailed by a terrible injury.
Live tonight on NBC.
Back now from Vancouver, where competition in one of the most daring and exciting sports in these games, the snowboard halfpipe, gets underway Wednesday. One of America's brightest Olympic prospects was Kevin Pierce, a young snowboarder from Vermont. But a devastating injury during training left him fighting for his life. Now, in an exclusive interview, his family is talking about it all for the first time. Here with that, NBC's Kevin Tibbles.
Artistry and athletics meant Kevin Pierce was a favorite to make the high-flying U.S. team. The 22-year-old is one of the few boarders to actually beat top-ranked Shaun White. Pierce did it twice. But his feet have always been on terra firma.
You see these athletes that blow up so big and get all this attention, and I feel like sometimes it really goes to their head.
Thank you. His grounded values come from a strong Vermont family used to adversity. Like his father Simon, a world-renowned glassblower, Kevin has struggled with learning disabilities.
What have you been doing all morning?
His older brother David has Down syndrome. But David's a trailblazer too, a Special Olympics ski champion. And Kevin's inspiration.
I look over to my left and see Dave, and he has this huge pile of medals, and he's already been to the Special Olympics, and he's already done that.
His mother, Pia, says the brothers have a special relationship.
I think Kevin has learned a lot about patience from David, because everything for David takes longer, and the challenges have been immense for him.
Four brothers who grew up living for snow. At just 8 years old, Kevin point-blank confronted board-making pioneer Jake Burton.
I asked him if they'd make me a kid's board because there was no such thing at the time, and then a couple weeks later he came back with this.
That board still hangs on his bedroom wall, along with boyhood dreams of gold. But to chase that dream, risk. Just last fall, Kevin's mother spoke of her anxiety watching her youngest son compete.
It is such a high-risk thing that he's doing all the time. And the opportunity for extreme injury is amazing.
Then a mother's worst fears realized. On New Year's Eve, while training on a 22-foot halfpipe in Park City, Utah, Pierce missed a new, difficult maneuver, the double cork. Slamming his head into the icy wall, and even though he was wearing a helmet, was left near death with severe brain trauma. Since then, his family has constantly been at his side, as Kevin has slowly begun to heal.
The brain has to mend itself. And in order to do that, it really needs to be quiet. I mean, often we just sit with him and hold his hand for hours. We don't talk to him.
Doctors say Kevin has memory loss, impaired vision, and must learn to walk again. But his brother Adam says Kevin's spirit is strong.
There's never been a time where he's complained or, been upset with where he is or what's happened.
You can just see it, feel it in him, that he's working his way through it. He's going to get there.
The sounds of last summer seem a long time ago, back when Kevin and his brothers practiced their moves. But tomorrow there will be a special reunion. For the first time since his accident, Kevin's brother David will be at his bedside to cheer him on. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Norwich, Vermont.
And when we come back, new images of a day in Dallas that changed every American alive that day. The grim scene this morning in Belgium. Two commuter trains collided head-on at high speed after one apparently ran a red signal. The accident disrupted rail traffic across northern Europe. At least 18 people dead, 80 injured. Investigators are trying to find out if freezing temperatures may have played a part in the crash. Federal safety officials said today the number of deaths that could be linked to sudden acceleration of Toyotas is now up to 34 based on consumer complaints they've received. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration says it's normal for complaints to increase after people get word of a recall, as more people become aware of safety defects that could have contributed to accidents in the past. It's not often we get a new look at American history, but that happened today when some never-before-seen color film was released showing President John F. Kennedy's last day on Earth. The cameraman was a 15-year-old Dallas schoolboy named Ward Warren. He was there with his film camera at Love Field in Dallas when Air Force One arrived. The President and First Lady emerged to a warm welcome. And think about it, at this moment, JFK had just over an hour to live. 34-year-old Jackie Kennedy would soon be a widow. Vice President Lyndon Johnson would soon be sworn in as President of the United States. Today, Ward Warren, in his 60s, lives in North Texas. When we come back, a small-town girl who could be on the fast track to glory here in Vancouver. Part of street life here in Vancouver, where on the Olympic schedule tonight, one of the big events is luge. It's the women's singles competition. Even as this community of athletes mourns the death of one of their own, the competition goes on, of course. One of America's hopefuls in this event, a young woman from a small town in upstate New York. And just about everyone in town will be watching and cheering and wishing Erin Hamlin good luck and a safe ride. NBC's Chris Jansing has her story tonight.
Erin Hamlin is so laid back, you'd never believe she could cause an uproar, but she did. At last year's Luge World Championships, Hamlin pulled off a stunning upset.
The luge world is rocked right now.
Handing luge-loving Germany its first loss in 99 straight women's races.
You always have that in the back of your head, wanting to beat the Germans, and I did it.
Chris Jansing, NBC News, Remsen, New York.
To find out more about Erin Hamlin and many more members of Team USA, you can go to our website, nightly.msnbc.com. And a reminder, NBC Sports primetime Olympic coverage begins tonight at 8/7 Central. Just don't interrupt anybody in Remsen during the coverage tonight. That's our broadcast for this Monday night. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams reporting tonight from Vancouver. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow evening. We'll leave you tonight with what we look like here in downtown Vancouver from our camera position, 4,000 feet above the city atop Grouse mountain. Pretty inconsequential in the scheme of things. Good night from Vancouver.